So, welcome everybody. I am Deborah Shepard, and I am with the South Bay Workforce Investment Board, working with Amelia Claywan on the BioFlex pre-apprenticeship and apprenticeship programs. I do want to let you know that this program is mainly focused on a cohort from West LA College, folks that are in a biotech, first level biotech class, but that doesn't mean that their background is as an initial student. Some of our folks are first-time students. Some of our folks have been in school, our past school years, are seasoned in an industry, but maybe not this industry. And so we've given that information to our panel, the three people that you see on your screen right now. And it's very, very important that you do put in the chat what you hope to get out of this session. Amelia will be culling this information and making sure that our speakers have it. The way the program is going to work today is that we will ask the three panelists to introduce themselves very, very briefly, just their name, position, and company, who they're representing. So really brief, because they're going to have time to talk about their career pathways afterwards. While they're doing that, it gives the rest of the attendees a chance to put what I hope to get out of this, and also to make sure you're ready to any questions. We are dividing the program into half. The first half is advice on how to start a career in the biosciences, life sciences. So our panelists just directed towards that end of it. We will then open it up to questions from what you've heard and any of our participants. Your questions, participants, can be either by raising your hand on one of the emotives down on the bottom, or it can be in a chat. Amelia will be monitoring the chat. Then we will go into the second half, which is on advice on changing careers. And we're going to be asking our panelists about their experiences. The first section would be on how they got into the industry. The second half on any changing that they've done within their career pathway and their advice to you. We will then open it again for questions and then go back to the panelists with their final thoughts and suggestions. So it's very tight time. We want to respect everybody's 1 hour. So again, I'm going to ask the three of you, starting left to right with the pictures, Gayani, then Elias, then Helen, just very briefly know who you are. So Gayani, let me start with you.
Yeah, hi everyone. My name is Gayani Weerasinghe. I am an intellectual property and business law attorney. I have my own practice, and I am also the chair of Women in Bio Southern California chapter. So that's how I came about here.
Yes, and we really appreciate. We lost our person from the Women in Bio due to a death in her family, and the way this group stepped in, I am really impressed. Thank you. Going on to Elias.
Hello, welcome everyone. Nice to meet you. My name is Elias Arjan. I'm the CEO and founder of a company called Business Brain, where we specifically serve companies in basically in the biotech, biohacking, and sort of health optimization space. How I actually came in to meet Deborah as one of my clients. I'm working with Bioscience LA, is the executive producer of a new media channel that we're developing to accelerate or amplify the message of life sciences and biosciences in the LA County. And so it's kind of wear different hats depending on what needs to be done, but maybe we'll get into that a little bit later, as Deborah said.
Great. Thank you so much, Elias, and thank you for being with us. Helen.
Hi everyone. My name is Helen Vong. I am the VP of Business Development and Customer Success at Seismic. So Seismic is a provider of career products and services for the bioscience community. We have a job platform that promotes diversity. It's gender blind, race blind, skills matching. So we help basically do the work for you, help you find jobs that are best fit for your skills, and also introducing you to roles that you may not have considered. So I got introduced to Deborah through one of our events. So we have a lot of career events. So this would be an example of one of them, I guess. And I'm happy to be here and share with you all.
Yeah, and the three of you are just incredible people, and we really appreciate your time. So let's get right into it. Do we have any comments, Amelia, on what they would like to get out of this program?
Wide range of early
just give us-
career guidance to transitioning to health sciences, to paths into specifically medical engineering, best way to get experience in bioscience. So it's a broad range.
Okay, gives me an idea. Okay, so panel, if you could talk briefly, we kind of have like 5 minutes each, on how you got started in your career. Don't go into any changes yet, but how you got started with your career and advice that now you would give to yourself as well as to everybody listening in now on how to start a career that goes into the biosciences. I know it's broad, but you're kind of, top level. So why don't we start with Elias?
Hey, I've had a very unusual career pathway, but how I got started in college, like probably a lot of people, I came from a relatively low income family. So I thought my goal in life was going to be to try to make as much money as possible. So when I was in college, I started studying business. And then when I took a biology elective, I basically fell in love with biology and what the human body was capable of. So I kind of changed my major to something called human kinetics, which is sort of athletic performance. So I started studying biology and moving into human athletics. I became a personal trainer. And then I was sort of working in the athletic space. And I actually had ambitions to actually go to medical school. So I kind of did like a pre-med, to prepare for that pathway. So it's kind of ironic that I ended up not pursuing a career in medicine. And yet now I've come back around and as sort of a business professional, I often end up finding myself acting as an educator to medical professionals on very specific things that I've become an expert in, for example, like wearable technology in the biotech space. So I had a very long pathway between what I studied in college and then how I ended up back into the sort of biosciences and life science and medical space. Did a lot of different things in between, but it's always been a lifelong passion of mine. And I think that's actually one of the things that if you have for me, like the passion of what the human body is capable of and sort of biology and human performance is something that I kind of live and breathe every day. So it's definitely always been a part of my life.
And do you have any advice for people to get started in this career or to get their first position?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and I guess that's part of what I'm saying is if you think about like biosciences, depends on where you want to fall in the industry. You don't always have to be, into sort of a technician in biology or physiology. But if you do have a passion for the human body and for biology, I do find that's obviously something that usually I find that actually can be cultivated with education. The more you learn about what the human body is capable of, the more fascinating it is. And then also too, I would say, because it is a scientific world, even if you're working in an adjacent industry relating to the bioscience realm, I would say, become familiar with the scientific method and start to understand what it means to apply science, whether that, because be quite honest, even as a business professional, I think one of the reasons I've been successful in business is because I've applied the scientific method to marketing. I've applied the scientific method to sales. So I would really think that, the term itself actually gives you some hints, right? Biology and sciences become familiar and interested in each of those areas.
Thank you. That's a lot of information. Helen, you work right in this field of helping people start careers. How did you get started? And what recommendations do you have for people to get started?
Sure. So I was the opposite of Elias. I wasn't going for the money when I went to school. I was like, I want to do things to help people. I want to connect with people. And so I went that route. And my studies is actually in social sciences. But as I had some life changes, I realized that technology is there's always gonna be a need for technology. There's always going to be a need for sciences. So my career, I ended up going into different industries, focusing on the technology. So it was the restaurant industry, banking industry, but I was also surrounded by a network of people that were in biotech. So my sister works on clinical trials. I also have another sister who is in biotech, but more on the aftermarket side of biotech as well. So being surrounded by a network of people, and I think we're going to talk about this later, but like having those networks and connections is important, and being introduced to opportunities. So I got introduced to Seismic through a mutual connection, who was looking for a certain persona for a role that they're trying to fill. And, so my name came up. They're like, you should ask Helen, she might be looking for something. And at the time I wasn't, but, when they introduced me to what this role was about, how I can help people, how I can help scientists find jobs, how I can help, companies fill roles and, further technology or facilitate that innovation in life sciences. It seemed like it touched on the social science aspect of what I wanted, which is to help people and help, help people with their careers or help people find better jobs. Mm-hmm.
And now help me again.
Gayani.
Gayani, how you got started? You have a different, and we'll talk about your pathway later, but how you got started in the bio end and advice you would give.
Yeah, so I started with, as an undergrad, I actually did biomedical research in cancer research I was at Cal State Northridge, and I was doing my BS in molecular cell biology, and I was working in a developmental and cancer biology lab. And after undergrad, I really wanted to take a few years off. I was pre-med also, but before med school, I wanted to go to do some research. So I actually started at National Institutes of Health as a postbac fellow, and I'm putting the information into the chat that has the information about the postbac fellowships. Those were really great. They are just like a 2-3 year fellowship where you can get experience working in a lab, being at NIH. So I wanted to be in DC area. I grew up in Los Angeles. So I moved there for that. That's how I got started. And then from there, I went to grad school and then went to law school. So that we will get into later. But what I will suggest is starting with like a fellowship or internships if you haven't have any experience. I know Biocom also has like internships for students that are paid internships. Those are great ways to get to know some industry like a biology. There's research associates positions. Those are things you could look into, and I will try to see if I could find the link for the Biocom internships. But the pre-ERTA fellowships, if you're willing to move, I really love my time in DC, so I highly recommend it.
Great. Thank you, three of you. So are there questions for our panel? You can either raise your hand or put it into chat, either one. Some questions for anyone or all of them. This is your chance. No? Amelia, are you seeing any? I'm not.
I think Whitney has a question about learning early career guidance, if she wants to clarify what that question is about. More than happy to answer.
Wendy?
Whitney.
Whitney, I'm sorry, Whitney. Do you want to get off mute and ask your question? Whitney, are you there? I didn't see her question. Oh.
I did put her on the spot. Sorry, Whitney.
Yeah.
We did have a couple people though, just asking about what's the best way to get started getting experience.
Okay, so let's kind of go back and, you know, if you had one piece of advice, each one of you, to how do you start, whether you're, I'm assuming that the people that are in this are either taking classes now or recently did, they're graduates. Let's break it down. If you are taking classes now, you don't have a degree in something that's bioscience, or even if you did, what would your first step be in terms of how do you find that first, whether it's job or internship? Gayani kind of mentioned some resources, and we will ask if our panelists have resources, plus the resources we're going to supply, we will be sending them out after this workshop. So if you had to do one big tip to get started in a career, what would that be? Who would like to offer one of the three of you?
I can share. I think LinkedIn, I think, is a very good resource. If you're interested in a career, not sure where to go, what I suggest you can do is maybe just look at different job titles. You can look at the job postings, see what type of jobs are available, what type of experience they're asking for. You can also, scroll around and click on other people's profiles as well. You can take a look at people's career trajectories. And if something looks interesting, I would say even connect with them and reach out and ask if you can have a chat with them. I think if there's a company in particular that you're interested in, what you can do, and which is common and really helpful, is if you reach out to maybe talent acquisition or an HR manager and just request like an informational interview. So there may not be a role that's available, but you can find out more about the company. You can show up with the resume, even if you are in school. Like we have samples of some resumes that that you can create while you're in school, like as far as putting your courses, what degree you're pursuing. So it shows that you're working on some experience, and then having that informational meeting, finding out about the company, handing them the resume, and just make sure that they keep you in mind. So if there's something that opens up, whether it's an internship, or they could, let's say that they really like you, they can even create an internship for you. So I think those informational interviews and just using LinkedIn as a resource is really, really helpful.
Thank you. Somebody want to add to that?
Yeah, I'd like
Elias.
I'll pick up on Helen's LinkedIn suggestion and sort of add the fact that as well, you can follow companies and you can join groups. And when you start following a company, you can even start to get a little bit of a flavor of like the mindset of that company, or even the culture to some degree by the way they post and what they're talking about, what they're focusing on. So, that would be a good way for you to get a sense. You think, well, maybe I'm interested in this company, but maybe you're not sure if there's going to be something there that's a fit. So you could just start following them on LinkedIn, following them on social media, get a sense of what the company is trying to achieve, and then see if that sort of aligns with your goals and values. And right now, I would say everybody who's interested in this field is very fortunate, because it's a employees market to some degree right now. A lot of companies are looking for staff, a lot of and a lot of the people I've talked to who have gone on internship programs, they're pretty high converting right now. So if you can get in on an internship, I've been hearing a lot of stories, and this is just anecdotal, but just in the LA region, my work with Bioscience LA, a lot of people end up getting hired after an internship. So Bioscience LA has an internship program. I'll share the link right now in the chat. And their whole mandate, if you're not familiar with them, it's a new and relatively new initiative here in Los Angeles to sort of connect all of the different players in the life sciences and biosciences in LA County into one place. And it's kind of going to be a hub. And so there's events going on. It's a physical space in Culver City. And there's going to be a lot kind of happening. And their internship, I think, is going to grow as they build their cachet. So another good place to look for potential opportunities there.
Definitely. And we are BioFlex and BioFutures, which is the program you're talking about, are working together. So we definitely will be able to connect the folks here.
I know that there's some attendees that are out of the Los Angeles area from like Northern California or Central California. So I have some resources for internships up there if anyone's out of the area.
Fabulous. Thank you. Anything for you, Gayani?
I think both Elias and Helen covered very good points. I would add something a little different about the LinkedIn part. If you are looking for jobs and you are on LinkedIn, make sure you clean up your LinkedIn. It's not a Facebook. This is my attorney side, but I work with HR at like the public company, and we do look at your social media. And it's important that you put a clear picture of you headshot, not something where you're holding your pet, because it's a professional environment still. I know there's some things about like being yourself, but you want to be yourself, but also make sure that you if you're applying for a conservative industry like legal or some of the positions in corporate, they are going to look for people who can fit into their environment. So putting yourself out there, you may want to have that uniqueness, but I'm saying not to take away the uniqueness, but also I'm saying don't use it as Facebook or any other social media platform.
Great. Thank you. Okay, let's, I'm not seeing any questions. I'm not seeing any more hands raised. So let's move on. Panelists, now we're going to share advice on how you changed careers, how you've changed careers, because I think each one of you has. What advice did you give yourself? And what advice did others give you to change the career? And what advice would you give to this group here, including the concept of networks? Let's include it here. So why don't we start where we ended? Gayani, go ahead.
Okay, so I probably have made a lot of trouble. Maybe not. I will wait to hear from like other two. So I started with pre-med, went into biomedical research. I was actually doing a PhD program with Johns Hopkins. And I was in my program, and as you know, you may not know, PhD programs are a very subjective process. My thesis committee was telling me I was looking at a 9-10 year PhD, and I was just not happy with that trajectory because our department actually had students who stayed for that long. So I knew it wasn't just them saying it is a real possibility. And at this point, I had lived in DC for 9 years, and I was kind of tired of the cold weather, and I wanted to move back to the West Coast. So I decided to take a terminal master's, and I was moving back in 2008, 2009, the worst job market when the economy crashed. So I ended up going to law school because honestly, I was only qualified to be like a lab tech at that point. I had a master's in biology, the terminal master's. So I decided law school because it gave a lot of opportunities. And when I got to law school, I prioritized my internship experiences. So I worked for 3 different codes, for 3 different judges. I worked at FISA as an intern, at a couple of other law firms, and I ended up graduating and going straight into in-house corporate at a public biopharma. And I was the right hand to their general counsel. So I did a lot of corporate dealings, transactions, and work with HR, a lot of matters. It's a very exciting place to be in-house, honestly. But there was some merger acquisitions, and I helped them raise $225 million. And one of those, merger acquisitions, I ended up getting laid off because that's how those things work. And I ended up going to a law firm because Sorrento, my company I was working at, they actually came as my client to the law firm, and it was a big law firm, but I just didn't like the work environment. I was there for 5 months and gave my notice and went to a smaller firm, and I was there for, that firm was great, but they lost a couple of clients and they couldn't afford to keep me. I was the most expensive employee for them. So they only had 2 other attorneys, and I ended up launching my own practice. So I kind of feel like I have lived so many different lives. And I think what I have found is, my advice would be, don't be afraid to take chances. If something isn't working, figure out what is making you unhappy or what's not working, and then you could troubleshoot. And I had to say, every single turn I have taken, my life have gotten better. Right now, I work with a lot of entrepreneurs, startups, and biotechs. I have a lot of autonomy in what I do. I have been recruited by firms and in-house to come back to work, but I refuse because I like my independence. So. But you had to figure out what you like, because I love business development. I like doing these kind of things. So it works for me. But if you are somebody who like to stay in a lab, do the lab work, this process probably won't work for you. So that's my advice, and that's my trajectory.
Fascinating. So, and just as, kind of a note to everybody, note all the different career options. You can have a science background, but you can be a lawyer, You can be in the legal department, regulatory. So, that's some of the things we want to think in expanding your options. Helen, go ahead.
I was dreading this a little bit, the confusion of my career trajectory. So I did mention that I was a social science major, so I didn't major in the sciences. And I, shifted careers originally, went to social work, help people. Like, I just want to help people. My dad says, you're not going to make any money. I was like, I don't care. As you get older and you realize, got to pay some bills, got to take care of others. I made a career shift. And I was working while I was in school, I was working at the restaurant. So I have a lot of restaurant experience, working as bartender, server. And so, my thought was, technology, technology, that's a growing industry. It's never going to change. It's always going to go up from there. So I was like, how can I get into technology? I don't have a technology degree. So there was a job that opened up for Real Mix Restaurants. So they're their corporate office of all the El Chorritos, the Acapulcos, the Chevys. And so it was like over 180 restaurant chains throughout the country. So they had a position open, entry level. You just have to have the restaurant experience. And that's how I got my foot in the door. I think finding your foot in the door with whatever industry you want to get into and being open to those opportunities. And once I was there, I think also like finding what you're really good at. I wanted to help people because I am really good at connecting with people, building relationships, supporting people and helping people. And I think that's really worked in my advantage. I know that that's my strength. So I worked there for a while. Then I decided to shift again. I was like technology, but working in banking. And I remember when I got interviewed for this job, he's like, you have absolutely no banking experience. Like, why should I hire you? And you don't even have a technology degree. I said, I'm going to tell you why. I said, coming up with your story and explaining why you fit in the role. So I told him, technology, a lot of times people are speaking very technical and you can't relate. Like sometimes you're calling support centers. They're walking you through how to fix computers and you can't understand. If you're just a regular person, it's really hard to understand. So I told him, I have a sociology degree. I said, I work well with people. In my last job, you saw how I moved up. I became manager. I don't have a technology degree, but if I get this job, I said, I'm good with communicating and connecting with the clients. I know the technology, I'll learn it quickly. And so I got the job. And from there, I moved up as well. And so with the role at Seismic, completely different industry as well. I think it's just being open to different opportunities. At first, when I got approached, like, from networking, people getting to know you. And I think just being yourself and being genuine, even if you're just, you never know who you're going to run into. I think that's my advice. So it was a social gathering, connected with Seismic's co-founder, and they were looking for someone, and my name got passed, and they offered me a job, and I took it, and it's been great. At first, it was a little bit scary. I was like, I don't know biotech, I know nothing, but I think being open and knowing how you can excel in each role that you're in, different industries. And so I've learned, and I'm the one who's talking to all the different hiring managers of biotech companies. I'm working with scientists, all different types of scientists, learning a lot of science too, not coming from science. It's been it's been a great opportunity. And I think my advice is just, even if you don't come from the sciences and you're interested, be open to the opportunities, meet people, connect, be genuine. And I think that'll take you a long way. Mm-hmm.
Thank you, definitely. Elias.
All right, Deborah, I don't know if you're going to be happy with me after I tell you my crazy story here on this one, because I have a very odd one. So I appreciated hearing the previous panelist stories. Mine is a very unusual circle in the sense that, as I said, I started in business, transitioned into athletics and even going into pre-med. And like Gayani, I decided that I didn't necessarily want to spend that much time getting my medical degree. So I decided to kind of figure out what I want to do with the athletics. And believe it or not, I ended up actually going into the performing arts. So I ended up becoming I did acting. I've even done stunt work. I've been on television and films. And believe it or not, I also even did circus work. So I performed in the circus. And I actually was a performer on a cruise ship. So I built up, in the performing world, that's pretty big when you actually start doing shows on cruise ships. And so I built up a career as sort of a traveling, touring comedy juggler. And I followed all of that because it was kind of what life served me and what felt kind of similar to the two panelists, what really felt right in the moment and what the world was providing me. And even though at times it seemed kind of risky or seemed unusual, I just said, I'm going to go with this. And my career, I definitely put in the work. I had to practice a lot of discipline and a lot of determination to achieve what, in the different fields I moved into. But when I was performing on a cruise ship, somebody came up to me and said, because they just saw me perform for a crowd of, 1,000 people, and said, if you take what you're doing and turn that into presentational sales, you will be extremely successful. And like Helen said, I was a performing artist. I was kind of doing okay, but really, didn't have any savings left at the end of the year. And I was kind of getting to the age where I was like, I think I got to pay some bills or make a little bit more income. So I decided to take them up on it. And I moved into presentational selling I did that for a number of years, was extremely successful. And so what happened was I became so successful at that, people started asking me, how do I replicate your results in sales and communication? How do I talk to people and close deals? And how do I build teams? Because I also built a team to do that. And so I went into consulting because people wanted me to tell them how to replicate my results. And so that's how I ended up by launching a consulting firm in 2012, my company. And then I started working with people individually initially, training them and running workshops on how to do these sort of, build their businesses. And I continued to follow my passion for athletics and health science just sort of on the side. And what happened was around 4 or 5 years ago, those two things merged. And my consulting business started to move into working predominantly with a health sciences company. And then I got recruited by a startup called Biostrap, which is like a wearable company, when I moved to Los Angeles in about 2018. So I spent a couple of years with them. And to Helen's point, I think what happened while I was working at Biostrap over the last 3 years is I built up a personal reputation while I was working with the company and a very good network of individuals. So what's happened to me recently, similar to Gayani, is I've been able to leave my role as a senior vice president with Biostrap as an executive with the company and launch my own consulting firm. And I have basically right now more clients than I can possibly handle. And I'm very happy that I have the freedom to do that. I'm working with the clients that I want to, when I want to, and sort of picking and choosing the way I'm operating right now. But that didn't happen overnight. I had to pay a lot of dues. I had to put a lot of work in. And so I would say that I guess my quick advice though on this is, yeah, be prepared to do the work. I would say first off. I would also say, if you can, establish yourself or establish a reputation for yourself with established firms or companies or environments, because if you kind of try to do it on your own, and I know today's a lot of people want to go into entrepreneurship and launch their own business or do their own startup. And I'm not saying you can't, but I'm saying until you know what's out there and until you know what other people are doing successfully, it's very hard to replicate those results. So I would just recommend, if you're at the early on in your career, put in some time in a place where you can really learn what's working and be very observational. Look at what the best people are doing and, turn yourself into a high performer, because right now companies are hungry for high performers. If you're performing at a high level inside of that larger organization, they will move you up. I mean, not all the time. Some companies, their culture is just not constructed properly, but typically there's a lot of mobility in the market right now, I guess is what I'm saying. There's my crazy long story. I hope I didn't take up too much time.
Panelists, do you want to add, does anybody want to add anything in terms of advice before I look at the questions? You're all on mute in case you do.
I would add that to what something Helen and Elias said both is that, how you present yourself. I think is really important when you're talking to potential employers. So if you're doing an informational interview, it's good to be authentic, but don't make excuses or say, like, be always try to look at how your set of skills can be a good positive way of presenting it, like what Helen was talking about. Like, she didn't have the experience in technology, but she knew her strengths. So working with the strengths, because I think when you talk to people, and especially like informational interview, and if you're saying, well, I don't have this, I spend all of this time, I'm this age, all of that is going to make an impression on who you're talking to. So if you spin that and say, well, I have all this other experience, I'm a really fast learner, and because I have spent all this time in these other industries, I bring these tools and I know how to apply it. And you could, you could put me with the team. I'm great with teamwork. That's what's going to make an impression. So I think, a lot of times people, when you're talking to somebody like the informational interview, just remember they're not your therapist. So don't go into like your counselor in a way. Try to talk in a way that you present yourself in a positive manner. Because I do talk to a lot of students and people, and I sometimes feel like I'm doing their motivational coaching when I'm talking to them and how they should talk to the employers. So that's why I'm adding that part.
Excellent, thank you. We have a couple of folks that have come out of the food industry. One was a sous chef for a number of years, Marco, and the other, Nikki. Actually, she also came from a restaurant background. They are both interested in something related perhaps to food science and entering the biotech industry from that aspect, but are open. They're open to, what else should they be thinking about? So I am wondering if anybody, even if you're not familiar with the food industry, and actually I know one of you has a little bit of information on the food industry, but are there suggestions on how, what type of food industry, food science occupations there are out there? And what would be more entry level, or where you can take your skills from in one situation being around the food industry for, I think it was, Marco, about 7 years. And then Nikki, maybe you can state a little bit more about what you did in the industry so that they have a better feel. Marco, do you want to add anything to that? You can take yourself off mute if you do.
Yeah, it was actually just 15 years, but no, it's all good. I guess it's a little bit of a runaround, just knowing where to start, because would like to get involved with something related to food, but having acquired all the skills within management, within shipping and receiving, within scheduling, all these things that come with management roles, it's just a bit overwhelming on where to go as far as the biotechnology world. Like, where could I start looking, or what companies are looking for if somebody were to come from this background? How can they contribute to the biotechnology world?
And I think we can make this, a little broad as well, that whether it's from food or something else, talking about some of the career options that you're aware of, perhaps, or any general advice. Would any of our panelists like to handle that?
I think I can start. Coming from the food and culinary industry, and also from the restaurant background, especially if you have interest in food science, I think that's a good start. Like, if they say, like, why are you making this switch? So it doesn't show that you're making this, it's not like, I guess, not that it's impulsive, but there's some thought behind it. Like, I was working with food, I was interested in food, and now I'm, venturing into the science part of it. I think what's great about the food science is, like, now you're getting a lot of companies like, Beyond Meats, Impossible Foods, a lot of, I guess, synthetic meat, as you would say, and it kind of runs off into different different types of companies as well. So in a food science, some of the skills that are needed within those roles can also be applied to, like, let's say a company that's making like synthetic leather, lab grown leather, or lab grown seafood, or something along those lines. And those companies, everyone's more into sustainability now. So that seems to be the way that things are going. So those are good, definitely good, good area, good fields to focus on. As far as getting some experience on how you would get into the roles, they do have more entry-level roles like technicians or research associates, and possibly even internships. I would say, try, like I mentioned previously, is maybe going on to, the job platforms and seeing if there is an internship for a food science company, and then see what type of requirements they're looking for. And if it's some basic laboratory skills, go try to, I know that there's different organizations that will have, you can pay to get some training on specific skills, or maybe even, go to a lab, like a local laboratory at a community college or the local college, and reach out to professor, like, I need to learn these skills. Can I, somehow take a class or somehow gain the way from the restaurant industry, culinary industry. I also have these laboratory skills, and that'll definitely help you land that job a lot easier. So prepare, I guess, don't go in it without any preparation. So, research the jobs, look at what types of skills they're asking for, see if you can gain those skills before you apply to the job to make it easier.
Anybody else want to add to that?
I could add something very briefly here. I do a lot of work actually with a lot of companies that are essentially in the supplementation or nutraceutical space. So I don't know if you're familiar with this, but there's a whole new field that's developing right now around sort of cellular medicine. So what it is now we have a lot of precision-based supplements that are kind of on the borderline between, essentially, they're not regulated like pharmaceutical drugs, but they're not quite like your typical like bulk vitamin D or vitamin E supplement that you buy in the store. They're kind of this in between high potency nutraceutical things like nootropics, very advanced supplementation. I'm very big into biohacking and athletics. So I work with a lot of these companies. So there is a new space that's evolving where they are looking for people who can represent these products, but have scientific understanding, because it's not just your typical food product, but it's not a drug or a medical product, but it's in this intermediate space. In fact, one of the companies I'm working with is even, I think is even doing some recruiting right now in Los Angeles. If you happen to be here, that I can share with Deborah potentially to pass on to this group. So there is a new space for this to look into, and it's related to kind of health science, sports science, nutraceuticals, nootropics. And the one thing I would add real briefly, if you want to connect with these companies, the places where I even get clients sometimes is conferences around this. So if you start following where the conference is, and if you can go as an attendee, you can see what the companies are doing at the conference, and you can get a sense of what's happening now that live events have come back. So I'm going to an event with one of the with where all of these companies are going to be. It's more for medical professionals, but something called A4M, which is a longevity anti-aging summit that's happening in December in Las Vegas. But conferences, I can't say how powerful meeting people in person, and how often that can turn into either a job or, for me, a consulting relationship coming out of those live events.
Fascinating. Any other thoughts?
I would add, to tag along to that, actually getting involved with professional networks, because since I'm the chair of Women in Bio, I will plug that type of organizations that they have student memberships. And I think a lot of times you get to meet then the people in the industry, like for instance, our organization, which is a 501c3, and we have chapters, 14 chapters across the country at Montreal. And what's great is we have people from students to postdocs to industry professionals to executives. And we have a lot of different programming, and we have panel talks. Like tomorrow, there's a panel talk on LA Showcase. Actually, our chapter extends from San Diego all the way to like Ventura County. because the other chapter is in San Francisco. So, that's a virtual event and it's a free event. And those kind of events, you could make networking, like chance to meet some of the professionals and just have a discussion. And you never know who you connect with. So I think that's another way to connect with some of the people in the industry. Looking into the industry, you want to connect, even the professional networks that are like this, different type of like sales networks and all these different networks. So taking a look at them and whether they have step students or whether what they're looking for can be a good place to start.
Thank you. Nikki, did you want to add any questions, or does anybody else have any questions they wanted to add?
Hi, I'm Nikki Cohen. I don't really have any more questions. I appreciate the feedback, and I specifically want to touch on what Gayani said. I think that I tend to downplay my experience. I have a lot of restaurant experience. I bartended, managed restaurants, waited tables for over 25 years. My problem for me is that I'm a little older, and I'm nervous. How do I, start as an older person getting into a different industry? It's tough to get a job as a young person, and when you are a little older, I don't want to be looked at as somebody who is too old.
I do.
And that's a good point, because Nikki isn't the only one in this group. This group ranges, the ones that we know, ranges from 18 to in their mid 40s. So that's a great question. How does somebody,
I'm 48.
Where does age fit in?
Yeah,
Right.
I'd love to reframe that. I don't think you're older. I think you're knowledgeable. I think you're
Exactly.
experienced. I think you're skillful. I think you're valuable, right? Older is not that just means you know more, to be quite honest. And when I'm hiring people,
Hey, thank you.
myself, and that experience, that carries a lot of a cash. I mean, I love working with young people who I can train, but when somebody already comes into the role, when it's the right time and the right person, it's great for me to be able to hand something off to somebody who I feel like I already can trust, that they know where to go with it. And so I would definitely, reframe that would be my suggestion.
I would like to add to that also, you bring the knowledge, you bring the experience, and you bring discipline. So, and you know how to understand responsibility, because sometimes I have worked with interns, and what's challenging is sometimes when they're very young is they don't have that same level of responsibility. And because I'm in legal, that's really matters. So, but I do think it can be an asset, and how you can talk about it is what you don't want to come off is as rigid, because you want to show off that you bring all of this, but you're malleable, that you can be trained on certain things. Because what I think sometimes maybe if your supervisor or manager is going to be younger than you, you want them to know that you're going to listen to them and that you're not going to try to boss them around. That's where I think the challenge comes from. So long as you're open to understanding and be trained, but you also bring this set of skills, I think you wouldn't have that, I wouldn't go in there with that mindset, oh, I'm not going to get this. I do a lot of mindset reset type of, I listen to a lot of those TED Talks. I do a lot of self-awareness work and meditation stuff. So I do think that there's something to be said about your enthusiasm and what you bring to the table.
I'd like to add to that too. I think it's great what you said, Gayani. So Nikki, the fact that you are bartending and waiting tables for 25 years, that means you're probably great with client facing, able to multitask. There's so many positive things that could come from that. And also dedicated. Look how committed you are within 25 years within the same industry. I think taking that and going to new jobs and just being confident. You're like, hey, I'm mature, just like I just said, you're mature, that you have the maturity, you're more developed, I guess, emotionally developed, hopefully because you're older. I think those are all positives that you can bring into a new work environment. For sure.
These are great comments. Thank you. So, for those that are on and those that are in the BioFlex program, I think you're hearing what I'm hearing. The blend of your technical skills are track 2 with your interpersonal skills, your communication skills, the track 1, which is the work readiness skills, and the concept of networking. I would say, I know that I have met some of these people from the same way that they've recommended to you, that I've been on LinkedIn, I have been on Zoom, I've Zoomified like crazy, as all of us have done during the pandemic. I have been to my first in-person meetings last week and this week, and I am introducing myself and introducing what our programs and looking for opportunities for each of you while I'm doing that. And then I'll immediately come back, like I bet these folks do, and I hope each one of you will learn to do, and I go right onto LinkedIn. And I introduce myself through LinkedIn. So that's what each of you can do, as well as go into Google or whatever your favorite browser is and say, professional organizations in blank, whatever your area of interest is. And that's how you're going to be able to find those organizations that our speakers are suggesting that you follow and get to know and go in. If they have webinars, if you can go in person, that's great. When you sign up for the BioFlex LinkedIn, anything that I find that's going to be free or low cost, you're going to find it there. So, use these resources most definitely. Any closing thoughts? Elias, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say I'd like to tap into something I think Helen touched on very early on and maybe use that to kind of my closing idea, is the fact that I think what's really important is to identify a little bit of what is your strengths, right? Some of you talked about being in like the food industry, right? The hospitality, let's say, or restaurant service, right? So that means you're looking more for a people job, right? And you're used to being around people. So do you really want to be in a lab coat doing research? Probably not, right? Maybe that transition is going to be too dramatic if you're used to being around people. So think about how you can orientate into the biosciences or life sciences within the context of where you already know your aptitudes lie. So it doesn't have to be as big a change as you might think. If you're a people person, you're good at talking to people. Now you're just talking to people about something different. You're not talking maybe about, what's on the menu, but you're talking about what nutraceutical has just been launched in the marketplace, or, so think about how to take what you already know and what you're already good at and just connect that to a new industry. And it may not seem like as big a jump as you might think.
Thank you. Gayani, do you want to, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I would say definitely. One of the things I would say is if you're applying for a job, one of the good ways to look at is talk to somebody who have worked in that industry, or see how the resumes are done, because each industry is a little different. If you're talking to a recruiter, they will also have samples. Take a look at those and make sure there's no typos. Get somebody to proofread it. And usually I will try to avoid saying I'm detail oriented on those kind of cover letters, especially because if you find a typo, it's just kind of go right out. So it's kind of, I would say these kind of more positive, more other things that you could add. The next thing is, as far as the LinkedIn reach out, because I get so many LinkedIn requests. If you're trying to LinkedIn with me, just let me know you'd met me on this forum, because I don't accept everybody, just because I try to accept only the people I have met. So do drop down that how you met me.
Yeah, good point. If anybody connects, there's a space that says, do you want to add a note? Definitely add a note. Helen, any closing thoughts?
Yeah, I think just one thing is just to remember to be grateful and have humility. I think that's important, especially if you're making those connections, reaching out to someone's making the time to speak to you, or maybe you're requesting those informational interviews. It's make sure that you follow up and you show your gratitude, because you don't know if that interaction is going to lead to another connection in the future. So you want to make sure that, with every step that you're taking towards this career transition, that you you're humble, and you show gratitude, and you make sure that you thank people for the time that they're taking to help you. Mhm.
Excellent. Thank you so much to a brilliant panel. Thank you very much. Just a note for everybody, our next session is the 18th, November 18th. And those of you that were interested in food, that's the December 2nd one. We are going to get into some things with food science, and hopefully we're going to get a little help from one of our panelists with a company that everybody knows. He knows who he is. And but we're going to have great lineups in our next two programs. Everybody that's on the program today, all of our participants, will get a follow-up email. Eventually, the link for that will have their LinkedIn again, as well as if they have provided an email that you may use, then go ahead. Use this opportunity to make connections. Tomorrow, the Women in Bio program is on Southern California female startups. So even if it's something that you're not quite sure of, I would suggest you tune in and start listening to people. Start tuning in and listening. This will be up on the BioFlex LinkedIn group, and it will, depending when we get our email out, it may be on the email as well. So that's tomorrow at 5:30. And I think that's basically it. Thank you again to our brilliant threesome here. If any of our folks thought of questions afterwards, you're more than welcome to either send them to us, to Amelia or to me, and we can pass them on, or you can make the suggestions that they gave you as far as how to connect on LinkedIn. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. And
Thank you, Deborah.
We will sign out. And this is recorded. As soon as we will go through, we will edit it. Not from our panelist point of view, but for anything that I've said or the beginning and so on. And then it'll be posted on the South Bay Workforce Investment Board's YouTube channel, along with our other ones. So thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Have a good rest of the evening.
Thank you all.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you.
Bye.